G'day, it's Ray here from Just Plain Interesting. How you doing? I have got the very great privilege today of coming to visit one of New Zealand's most famous journalists. And this gentleman here, his name is Owen Poland.
You flatter me, Ray.
No, it's true, mate. Thank you very much for inviting me back to your house.
You're welcome.
Owen discovered my passion for selling things in the antique shops and curio shops from the war era, and approached a very lovely mutual friend in regard to that, whether I would be interested in some war relics that his dad had brought back from the war when he was released from a prison camp, when he was incarcerated in Poland for 3 years?
4.
4 years. And the Russians got to the prison camp first, and then the Americans.
They would have followed pretty quickly after that. That's
and then
right.
assisted him in
being
repatriated.
He was then repatriated back to the UK initially, and then spent a little while there, basically getting sorted out because he wasn't that well, along with all the other troops, after 4 years in a prisoner of war camp in Poland in pretty tough conditions, and then the long road boat back home to New Zealand and back to normal life.
No one has a normal life after the war, especially after 4 years in a prison camp.
Correct.
But so anyway, I came to meet Owen about 3 weeks ago, and we had a look at his amazing relics that his dad had brought back, and all the war medals that are definitely aren't for sale, that his father earned the hard way, like all the boys that went to war. But I was touched, and I was touched by a very moving story, an emotional story that Owen told me about this picture here. That now, did you find this under in the family?
Well, it was left behind in the family home when my mother died. It was in a box of photos and other prints and so forth, and it was at the bottom. And I thought, well, that's a nice sketch of my dad, and so I'll put it on the wall and just admire it. But the glass was filthy. It was covered in detritus from years of being in a box. So I decided to pull it apart. And that's when I made a discovery that really changed my entire view of my father. But the sketch itself is really interesting, by the way, because that sketch was done by a chap by the name of A.A. Austin Deans, who was actually a war artist in the Second World War. And he was captured in Crete. He was wounded. He set off a landmine and was wounded, and he was in the field hospital with my father. I'm getting ahead of the story a bit, Ray, but Austin Deans, the artist, was in the field hospital where my father was stationed in Crete, and they were both captured at the same time. And he then later did this sketch when they were recovering at a hospital in Greece. So the sketch has its own story, actually, and that's before I took it apart.
Okay, because Owen didn't have a huge amount of passion for his dad as a father, because unbeknownst to Owen and most of the kids that grew up with parents that came back from the war, they were so heavily scarred by what they'd done and seen that they weren't the most perfect parents quite often, because they were distracted by life. Some of them turned to drinking quite heavily and abused their wives or their children, all sorts of variations from, it doesn't mean they're all bad, but some of them just had emotional and mental problems that manifested themselves in terrible ways.
I think these days they probably call that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, they identify things properly now. Well, hopefully properly. Yeah. But when Owen went to clean the glass on the sketch by that famous artist, he found a letter in the back of the picture that was addressed to his mum from his dad.
No, it was addressed to my dad's aunt, Margaret.
Oh, really?
That's right. And Margaret was his closest, and Bill was his next of kin at the time, because my dad and my mum were only kind of courting, if you like, before he went away to war.
Right.
So these were his official next of kin. And so he wrote this letter to them on the back of this print. And that was a revelation, obviously, because I didn't know this letter existed behind the print. And it was written from a POW hospital in Piraeus, which is the main port in the south of Greece, in August 1941. And dear Aunt Margaret and Bill, just a line or two to let you know that I am still alive and quite well. As you will see by the above address, I am a German prisoner of war and have been such since the 22nd of May. Oh, wow.
Captured in Crete.
Captured in Crete. With the 21st Battalion, they were fighting an onslaught of Germans, mostly from the air, paratroopers primarily, and they were protecting an airfield that eventually got overrun. And my father was in a field hospital, tending to about 70 wounded soldiers, Allied and German soldiers.
Which probably saved his life.
I believe it did save his life. The fact that they had wounded Germans with them, because the Germans were very angry when they finally captured Crete, and they wanted to kill anybody that wasn't one of their own. And the interesting thing is that the officer in charge of that field hospital was a Captain Owen Hetherington. Now, I'm named after Captain Hetherington, and Captain Hetherington was born in Thames, by the way.
All right.
He was a surgeon in Thames Hospital before he went into the war. And so there's a kind of strange connection there, because my mother came from Thames and I was born in Thames Hospital. So this kind of almost amazing little circle of life going on there. And anyway, I didn't appreciate that, but my dad mentioned that in the course of this article that he basically stayed behind with Captain Hetherington, I'm sure others, to look after the wounded, and everybody else, all the other Allied soldiers, ran for the hills to avoid being killed by the Germans. And eventually they evacuated from Crete, but my father was captured along with about 2,000 other Allied troops, and then they began the long journey into Greece and then up to Germany and into a prisoner of war camp in Poland.
They would have been put on troop trains and sent up through Yugoslavia.
Not troop trains, they were cattle trains.
Oh, right, that's right.
Yeah, they were cattle trains that took them into Poland.
Yeah, no, I've read accounts of that, actually.
Yeah. So it was then, and as I wrote an article for the New Zealand Herald for Anzac Day a couple of years ago about this, which said how I discovered my father was a war hero. And this is how I discovered it, by appreciating what he had done and the situation he was in.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, I'm very glad you brought that to the fore. It's a brilliant article, and you should be able to find it online if you would like to read the full story. Now, we're actually in the military section of the new shop in Pairoa, where Owen went to school, by the way. We're going to have this article reprinted on the side of a cabinet that has, shock horror, some German uniforms in it, World War II, some genuine, some reproduction. But Owen asked me if I'd be interested in buying some war relics. This bayonet here, which is in excellent condition, and I was particularly happy to be able to do a deal with Owen to purchase that for the shop. But there was also this, which is a great rarity, and some people look at such things with disdain, but to me it's a piece of history, which is what I represent, my shops represent, continuing history so that people can learn from it and hopefully avoid such horrific things by us not going there again. But this is a very unusual thing to find anywhere, mate. It's, I believe it's off a SS battalion standard, which is like a flagpole that they carried into battle ahead of the troops or with the troops. Many, many years ago, I had an SS occupation flag that was 2 stories tall that hung out of the windows of the headquarters in various occupied towns. But I haven't seen anything like this or had anything like this on offer for many years, and I'm very privileged to have it. Thank you very much for that. But we are going to put it on display. We will have warning signs by the military area, like we did in the last shot, to say to people that there is a sensitive area, and if they prefer to avoid it, it could be beneficial for them if they are upset by such things. But it always baffles me why I don't get baffled by the fact people get upset over, especially SS, in German uniforms and things. But no one seems to get upset over Japanese,
True.
I mean, the Japanese atrocities were arguably as severe and horrific as the Germans. And yet nobody makes any comment when they come in and see Japanese things in my display cabinets, and they drive Japanese cars and, watch their Japanese videos. But everyone takes exception to Germans. So, yeah, I'll never get over that one.
Yeah, well, it might have had something to do with the Auschwitz and the mass extermination of the Jews, Ray, to be fair.
Oh, true.
We shouldn't forget about that. But it's interesting. I mean, I believe my father brought this home as a souvenir. And you might think, well, that's a pretty strange souvenir to do. But when you're 27 years old, you've been banged up in a prisoner of war camp for 4 years, and you're thinking, I want something to remind myself of what I've just been through and
lived through,
and that was it.
Yeah.
And it's no more than that. I mean, it's not a demonstration of anything other than just just a souvenir.
It's a piece of history, literally.
Yeah, and a piece of horrible history.
Yeah. Turns out I Googled, I asked my phone, because I'm not very good at Googling. I thought there was something to do with scuba diving. And I Googled the phone and said, how many concentration camps were there? And they came up with 1,100 concentration camps. That's incredible, horrific. I always thought of the ones like Dachau and Auschwitz and, the ones that are quite commonly known. But to have 1,100, I don't know how many actual prisoner of war camps there were.
I don't know, but all I can tell you is that, I mean, this was initially known as Stalag 8B. It was later renamed Stalag 344 at Lambsdorff. Now, it probably handled about 100,000 Allied troops during the Second World War, not at the same time,
Right.
but it actually had a previous history. It actually served as a Stalag in the First World War and during the Prussian Wars, and I read that 40,000 Russians died in the Stalag where my father was kept. 40,000. It wasn't like that when he was there, apparently. I mean, actually, they were relatively well looked after, and right at the end of the war, they even showed a movie or two to the POWs, which,
When was he released? 44?
1944. He was released, actually, no, I tell a lie, 1945, sorry. I checked my notes, he was 27 years old when he was released in 1945, having been captured in 1941.
Well, you said that Charles Upham, New Zealand's most famous VC holder, was also in Crete.
Correct, yes. I mean, Crete and Greece before it, they were two very short but famous battles. The entire campaigns lasted no more than a month in Greece and then another month in Crete. And the battle for Crete was only 12 days from start to finish. And yes, Upham was there. He got his first VC for bravery for fighting the Germans in Crete as part of the second echelon who tried to defend it. But I mean, they were both futile battles. In Greece, the 21st Battalion, which my father belonged to, they were sent to the northern part of Greece to try and slow down the German invasion. and they were meant to sort of block a railway tunnel and a pass where they thought the Germans were rightly going to come through. And then when they saw the lights at night, they sent a scout out to see what was coming, and he counted more than 100 tanks from the 2nd Panzer Division, at which point they thought, and they were already planning an evacuation before the defence had even started. They realised that it was probably pretty hopeless, and when they saw 100 tanks just coming at them,
Right.
that was just one movement that the Germans were doing on Greece, and they were gone within weeks. Just retreated to Crete, where they were thrashed again.
Yeah.
You know, it was pretty crazy
But the
stuff.
Anzacs were put in there because Churchill was overcommitted with other.
Yep, correct. Yeah, and it was a rear guard in Greece. It was definitely a rear guard action. I mean, it was actually defined that if they could stall the German advance by 36 hours, they'd succeeded. I mean, ridiculous, and a huge loss of life. And at Crete, the Allied troops lost about 6,000. The Germans lost 6,500, including 3,500 paratroopers that were basically shot out of the sky.
It was the first major.
It was the very first time that Germany had used, and it was the last time they ever used paratroopers because they were sitting ducks in their parachutes. But like you're talking about 13,000 lives were lost in 12 days in a battle that actually had no sense in the end. I've been reading a bit more about it since I first met you, Ray, and they talked about Crete was strategic and the Germans were going to set up a port there and they would control part of the Mediterranean Sea and stuff. It actually never happened.
Oh, really?
It was just a waste of space pretty much from the beginning.
Right.
The follies of war.
Oh, yeah, it's horrific, isn't it?
And here's, by the way, my dad, I mean, he did have some issues later in life, and I remember him kind of being very bitter about the fact that he was, and this is his pay book, by the way, and in here it shows the pay rates for, and he was a private, so he was the kind of at the lowest rank, and he's paid 3 shillings a day, as he said then, 3 shillings a day to kill Germans.
Right.
And he was quite bitter about that because he actually, I think he kind of came to know and maybe even like the Germans, that they were looked after reasonably well. And just in case you need reminding about his life, he signed up for the war when he was 21, got out of prison in Germany when he was 27. So his certificate of discharge officially records that he was in the army for 6 years and 146 days. And he was only 27.
It's a pretty pathetic hourly rate, isn't it?
I don't think anybody these days who's 27 could imagine spending, a quarter of their life in the army.
Well, at least he was lucky enough to come back.
But he was very fortunate to come back. But he died at the age of 50. So it was a relatively short and troubled life in the end.
Well, I'm sure he's very proud of his son, the way it's turned out.
Well, I'll never know. That's the great frustration, Ray. I was 14 when my father died, so I never got an opportunity to talk to him about any of this. So I've had to kind of just over the years come, to terms with the story and who he was and imagine what it might have been like. And I can only imagine. I wished I could sit down and talk to him about it.
Yeah, me too. I lost my father, and he was Merchant Navy, because my great-grandfather and my grandfather were both Royal Navy, but Dad wanted to follow in their footsteps, but he was colourblind, so they wouldn't accept him. So he went to the Merchant Navy to try and do his piece, but he got torpedoed twice. And watched his friends die in the water. So I have an equivalent. Yeah. But anyway, look, mate, it's been a great privilege and pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
And to be involved in your father's story. I'm over the moon to put these things on display and to put the history of your dad and this, how I discovered my father was a war hero, because that's what he was, and that's what we'll proudly put on in the shop. So if anyone has an interest in such excellent history, please come and see us, because I couldn't think of a better thing to read.
And I'm chuffed that you're going to Pyro to set up my hometown, and
It's cool.
in a way, it's a homecoming for my father.
Yes.
I mean, he was born in Auckland and grew up in Auckland, but he lived and died in Pyro. And so it's kind of nice that his story can be retold there.
Right.
Thank you for that.
I agree with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All the best.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, guys. Thank you for listening to a good piece of history. Bye-bye.